July 10, 1509. John Calvin, born in 1509, in Noyon, France. He was a great theologian and founder of Presbyterianism. John Calvin was a French theologian, pastor, and reformer during the Protestant Reformation. He was born as Jean Calvin on July 10, 1509, in Noyon, a town in Picardy, France. Calvin was raised in a staunch Roman Catholic family, and his father was employed as an administrator in the town's cathedral. Calvin's father wanted him to become a priest, but Calvin instead became a principal figure in the development of the system of Christian theology, later called Calvinism, including its doctrines of predestination and of God's absolute sovereignty in the salvation of the human soul from death and eternal damnation. Calvin studied at the University of Paris, the University of Orleans, and the University of Bourges. He later wrote the Institutes of the Christian Religion in 1536, which is regarded as one of the most important works of Protestant theology. Calvin's interpretation of Christianity, as advanced in his Institutes of the Christian Religion and the institutional and social patterns he worked out for Geneva, deeply influenced Protestantism elsewhere in Europe and in North America. John Calvin's teachings influenced the Protestant Reformation. The doctrine of predestination. Calvin stressed the doctrine of predestination, which is the idea that God has already determined who will be saved and who will be damned. This concept was a significant influence on the Protestant Reformation. Institutes of the Christian Religion. Calvin's influential work, Institutes of the Christian Religion, was the first systematic theological treatise of the Reform movement. It was widely read and helped to spread Calvin's ideas throughout Europe. Church governance. Calvin believed in a strict form of church governance, which emphasized the authority of the clergy and the importance of discipline and morality. His ecclesiastical ordinances, which outlined a church order that included enforcement of sexual morality and abolition of Catholic superstition, were instituted by the Town Council of Geneva in 1541. Spread of Calvinism. Calvinism spread throughout Europe, particularly in the Netherlands, France, England, Italy, and Scotland. It became a significant force in the Protestant Reformation and had a lasting impact on Western civilization. Calvinism had a significant impact on Scotland, both directly and indirectly. This influence transferred to the American colonies, when many Scottish immigrants landed in the Americas. Here are some ways in which Calvinism influenced Scottish culture and literature, and therefore also influenced heavily the Americas. Religious influence. Calvinism was the dominant religion in Scotland during the Reformation and had a significant impact on Scottish culture. It provided a framework for morality and ethics, and its emphasis on hard work and thrift helped to shape Scottish society. Influence on literature. Calvinism also had a significant influence on Scottish literature. Many Scottish writers, such as Robert Burns and Walter Scott, were influenced by Calvinist themes and ideas. Calvinism's emphasis on sin, guilt, and redemption provided a rich source of inspiration for Scottish writers. July 6, 1855. Louis Pasteur gave the first successful anti-rabies inoculation to a boy who had been bitten by an infected dog. Louis Pasteur was a French chemist and microbiologist who made remarkable contributions to science, technology, and medicine. Some of his most significant discoveries include germ theory of disease. Pasteur discovered that microorganisms cause fermentation and disease, which led to the development of the germ theory of disease. Medical microbiology and immunology. Pasteur developed the earliest vaccines against fowl cholera, anthrax, and rabies. He is widely credited for inventing the process of pasteurization, which is named after him, to preserve foods. He also made significant contributions to combating cholera. Chemistry. Pasteur made significant discoveries in chemistry, including the molecular basis for the asymmetry of certain crystals and racemization. Louis Pasteur developed the earliest vaccines against fowl cholera, anthrax, and rabies. Pasteur's method of vaccine development involved attenuating or weakening the microbe involved. In his research campaign against disease, Pasteur first worked on expanding what was known about anthrax, but his attention was quickly drawn to fowl cholera. This investigation led to his discovery of how to make vaccines by attenuating or weakening the microbe involved. Pasteur usually refreshed the laboratory cultures he was studying, in this case fowl cholera, every few days. That is, he returned them to virulence by reintroducing them into laboratory chickens with the resulting onslaught of disease and the bird's death. Months into the experiments, Pasteur let cultures of fowl cholera stand idle while he went on vacation. When he returned and the same procedure was attempted, the chickens did not become diseased as before. Pasteur could easily have deduced that the culture was dead and could not be revived, but instead he was inspired to inoculate the experimental chickens with a virulent culture. Amazingly, the chickens survived and did not become diseased. They were protected by a microbe attenuated over time. In 1881, Pasteur helped develop a vaccine for anthrax, which was used successfully in sheep, goats and cows. The vaccination procedure involved 2 inoculations at intervals of 12 days, with vaccines of different potencies. Rabies was a particularly vile disease that usually resulted in the death of the victim.
बाबू को 30 दिन पहले गली के कुत्ते ने काटा था। 1 मई से लेकर 30 मई तक ये बच्चा कुत्ते के काटने से जूझता रहा, यूं ही तड़पता रहा।
Pasteur's procedure for developing the rabies vaccine involved injecting a rabbit with the spinal cord of a rabid dog, waiting until the rabbit showed signs of rabies, and then injecting the rabbit with a weakened form of the virus. After the rabbit recovered, Pasteur would repeat the process with increasingly virulent forms of the virus until the rabbit was immune to the disease. A victim who is bitten by a rabid animal will die if they have not been vaccinated before being bitten. Pasteur's research in chemistry led to remarkable breakthroughs in the understanding of the causes and preventions of diseases, which laid down the foundations of hygiene, public health, and much of modern medicine. His scientific accomplishments earned him France's highest decoration, the Legion of Honour, as well as election to the Académie des Sciences, and many other distinctions. Today, There are some 30 institutes and an impressive number of hospitals, schools, buildings and streets that bear his name. July 18, 1918. Nelson Mandela was born the son of a Tembu tribal chieftain on July 18, 1918 at Khunu, near Umtata in South Africa. Nelson Mandela was a South African anti-apartheid activist and politician who served as the first president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He was the country's first black head of state and the first elected in a fully representative democratic election. His government focused on dismantling the legacy of apartheid by fostering racial reconciliation. Mandela was a controversial figure for much of his life, with critics on the right denouncing him as a communist terrorist and those on the far left deeming him too eager to negotiate and reconcile with apartheid supporters. However, he gained international acclaim for his activism and is globally regarded as an icon of democracy and social justice. He received more than 250 honours, including the Nobel Peace Prize.
But the dirt road that runs parallel to this small country store marks the beginning of a vocation in the town of Nelspruit, the African location where natives are forced to live. Nelspruit, a small mining town in the northern Transvaal, has for the past week been the focus of the racial tension in South Africa.
Mandela's anti-apartheid activism made him a frequent target of the authorities. Starting in 1952, he was intermittently arrested and imprisoned for his political activities. In 1962, he was sentenced to life imprisonment for conspiring to overthrow the state. He spent 27 years in prison for political offences.
In 1963, he was tried for sabotage and planning a violent revolution. He was sentenced to life imprisonment.
At the end of the evidence he presented to the court, Nelson Mandela spoke these following words.
I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
Nelson Mandela's imprisonment had a significant impact on the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and around the world. Here are some ways in which his imprisonment affected the movement. International attention. Mandela's imprisonment became a cause célèbre among the international community that condemned apartheid. His imprisonment brought attention to the issue of apartheid and helped to galvanise opposition to the South African government's policies. Symbol of resistance. Mandela's imprisonment turned him into a symbol of resistance against apartheid. He retained wide support among South Africa's black population throughout his incarceration. His refusal to give up his efforts to achieve equality for all people inspired others to continue the fight against apartheid. Negotiations. Mandela's imprisonment made it difficult for him to participate in negotiations with the South African government. However, he continued to act as a leader and mobilised his fellow political prisoners. After he was released, Mandela helped negotiate an end to apartheid and became the first democratically elected president of South Africa. International pressure. The international community's condemnation of apartheid, in part due to Mandela's imprisonment, put pressure on the South African government to end the system. The Free Nelson Mandela campaign became a worldwide movement that helped to raise awareness of the issue and put pressure on the South African government to release him. Overall, Mandela's imprisonment helped to bring attention to the issue of apartheid and galvanised opposition to the South African government's policies. His refusal to give up his efforts to achieve equality for all people inspired others to continue the fight against apartheid. His eventual release and subsequent negotiations with the South African government helped to bring an end to apartheid and usher in a new era of democracy in South Africa. In 1993, Mandela and South African President F.W. de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to dismantle the country's apartheid system for generations to come. Mandela will be a source of inspiration for civil rights activists worldwide.
One of the things that is difficult for me to comprehend is that we spent such a long time here. And there were moments of joy. But of course, there were painful moments because the apartheid regime was an expert in persecuting.